but I actually took a trip to the mountains this week and received a different message that I wanted to leave for you today. So the piece that I prepared within the last few days is called, Let Me Tell You About My Hero. So, see, one of my sheroes, Maya Angelou, said, and I quote, I think we live in direct relation to the heroes and sheroes we have. So, how could they claim I'm of the lost generation if my heroes and I are in direct relation? Because my hero, they call one of the greatest speakers as he sparked hearts with hope and dreamers. So his legacy, how do I begin to bestow it and show justice in the description of this poised poet whose passion moved the hearts and souls of the masses? See, my hero said, you must learn to first follow before you can learn to lead. Martin Luther King was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi gained eyes while he successfully utilized tactics of nonviolence in his fight for civil rights. But it took a true godly man with that true peaceful insides to allow himself to be inspired by a man who openly made demands for every race and nationality of people except the Black African. But instead of attacking or retracting his love and reacting with rage or anger, he was able to view this man's tactics subjectively, gravitating to the key necessities of his strategies that made his movement move successfully. It took intelligence and strength and spirit to gracefully take a tactic and add his own caption or difference in intention. He moved with the intention to create equality for all people, no matter the pigment dictating a race or religion. So in honor of my hero's birth on Earth's anniversary, let's talk about his strength and discipline behind his spiritual and general principles. See, my hero took a stab in the chest, struggling to take a breath, and his very heartbeat depended on his ability not to sneeze. But instead of him tucking his tail and accepting defeat or overheating, screaming for her very life to be deleted, he stood before the public and let them publish him speak of having no ill will towards the culprit. I'm talking about a man that got a call and rushed homebound after news his house was burned down, rushing, hoping his wife and child's heart still pumping, just to find out they're okay. But a mob was waiting to hear what he had to say. As he stepped out in what was left of his steps now, while the people were yelling loud, grabbing for any weapon found, pain and anger penetrating, blaming this invasion on those pro-segregation, all ready to ride out to their times out, and led to the incarnation in heaven's nation. But what was his statement? We cannot fight hate with hate. You can only fight hate with love. And some view that as a weakness, as if it's not easy as just popping off rather than walking in calls. Especially when you got a whole fleet ready to beat something to the white meat, but instead you got a heart to speak of peace. That's a disciplined strength in spirit, in spirituality or biblical and general principles. I'm talking about a man that after that made a stand, gathering hundreds of thousands from the steps of Washington, D.C. to television screens to let the world know he had a dream. A man who took threats, witnessed deaths, and gave his last breath. I mean, a man I'm talking about in his time was the youngest to win a Nobel Prize for fighting days and nights for the simple civil rights, like it just being noted colors have the right to stand in line for voting, not knowing he was fighting for paving the way for an African that can get a white woman impregnated without being hanged or her being shamed, and that child grow to be the face frame and celebrated an inauguration for the first black president and lead this great nation, because my hero had a dream. I'm talking about a man whose blood had to have ran stronger and his ancestry that ran this world for thousands of years. That's ages. Even though he knew he was of the people who experienced the most inhumane and mass numbers of enslavement, and in a few hundred years went from bloody backs and sweat on plantations to the final signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, to the time of him sacrificing his very life to fight for the day we would not be judged by the color of our skin, but the content of our character. But I'm aware for some it's hard sometimes to see the light that still breathes life in his dream. When some hear sirens and mothers crying and headlines on TV screens behind black children and fathers' blood on curbs like a planned year-round purge behind the same hands we trust to protect and serve. But I will tell you, there's no room for doubt now. How dare you take away from how high we've climbed? In just these couple centuries, I've testified it's time to tap into our ancestry's mystery and write new history over these next centuries. Don't let this man's name and what he stood for go in vain, but instead honor Martin Luther King by acting to breathe life into the belief of his dream. Thank you, everyone, for having me.